Former President Trump is wading into election waters again, but not for a campaign of his own. Trump is actually backing several down-ballot candidates for Michigan's state legislature, a full 9 months before the GOP primary. All 7 candidates who received the former president's endorsement have one thing in common. They've promised to investigate 2020's presidential election and have made election administration central to their platforms. NBC reports the endorsements, quote, illuminate just how driven Trump is to exact revenge on those who haven't supported his baseless claim that the last election was stolen from him. Team Rising is here to weigh in. Michael Starr Hopkins, Democratic strategist and president of Northern Star Strategies, and Marissa Martinez, Republican strategist and partner at Strategic Rush. So, Marissa, how big a problem is it that you have Trump still as this, power broker, still clinging very strongly to power in the Republican Party with the strength of the support he has from a vocal contingent of the base, and he is uses that power to force everyone to take out to take stances on the last election that are neither correct nor popular. And if he forces Republicans to talk constantly about the 2020 election, how is that going to help them in 2022 and 2024?
Well, it's no secret that Michigan is an integral part of the Electoral College. For a while, we thought that Michigan, was a lost cause simply because no Republican could win it until Trump came along and broke that mentality in 2016. Before that, we hadn't seen a Republican win it since '88 with Bush. So I think it's, incredibly smart to continue to have Michigan in play and almost start to set the stage for 2024.
And Michael, how concerning do you think this is for the 2024 election? Because on the one hand, Trump is just doing, what all former presidents, what all politicians are able to do, which is, endorse candidates, within primaries and in elections. That's part of the democratic process. Yet he's doing it through the rubric of opposition to the way that the election was run. He believes it was stolen, and he wants to elect people who similarly believe that it was stolen, presumably so in 2024, if he again cries that it was stolen, that they'll act on it.
Yeah, let's stop pretending that this is him participating in a democratic process per se, and acknowledge that this is him doing the coup part 2. Because what he wants to do is put in place a state legislature that will overturn an election if he were to lose. This has nothing to do with him wanting to pick a ticket because he believes these are the best politicians to put in place because he agrees with their principles. This is him literally saying, if I had had more Republicans who support me blindly in place in 2020, I would be president. This is something that no Republican should support. This isn't, how we make America great again. This is how we build a more authoritarian, more autocratic government. And so as a Democrat, I'm terrified, but more importantly, as an American, I'm terrified because the rhetoric that he used in 2020 post him losing the election was bad enough to lead to January 6th. I can only imagine what it will look like in 2024 should we have a contested election and now we have states participating in the overthrow or overturning of an election. It's a disaster. It's something none of us should want. It literally makes it so that people can't be confident in our style of election, and it rips at the fabric of who we are.
And even if the argument you're making isn't persuasive, I think it's persuasive, but if it isn't persuasive to people on the right, shouldn't they consider, Marissa, that Trump doesn't just want to prop up people who agree with him. He wants to destroy everyone in the Republican Party who is unwilling to go this far, down the line with him. And that is not healthy. That is a winning political coalition cannot be assembled if those are Trump's terms.
So I think when we're looking at Michigan and other states that are going to be in play, one of the reasons that Trump is hyper-focused on states like Michigan, Michigan's legislature has historically been red for some time. That's just a fact. Redistricting is not going to affect that. So I think, when we talk about the Trump endorsement, we're looking at candidates here who, have historically just done well in that state. And I think that that's something that we're just going to have to see play out in 2022. And that's further going to set the stage for 2024.
And Michael, do you think
that's a polite way of putting it? To say that he's just picking candidates, like, no, he's not just picking candidates because he thinks they follow the MAGA, doctrine. Like, he is literally going to swing states, and trying to shift the way the legislature is built so that if he were to lose the election, that unlike in 2020, it wouldn't be left up to Mike Pence. It wouldn't be left up to whoever he runs as his VP, that they can literally shift the way that the elections are counted and the way that people actually are reporting it. That is horrifically dangerous, and something that no president has done. I mean, listen, I was alive and I knew what was going on during the Bush 2000 election. That was something that, Al Gore, Herbert Walker Bush, Bush W., I mean, none of them would have ever, involved themselves in that kind of nefarious activity.
Right, and the thing that Mike Pence kept pointing to when he was telling Trump and people around him that he wasn't going to overturn the election was that there were no other electors. The Electoral College had sent a single set of electors from every state, and it was his job to just count those, and that's what he was going to do. The implication there was that, Mike Lee and others looked into this. They talked to legislators and governors at states across the country, saying, "Is there a chance that you're going to send other electors?" And they did not. And so, while they ransacked the Capitol, the system held. But if there were other electors, let's say Michigan had sent, or Arizona had sent a slate of electors saying, we don't trust these Hugo Chavez invented machines, and so we actually say that Trump won Arizona. There's a sense that would have given Pence the opportunity to say, well, there are two different electors, I can't count them, therefore we throw the election to the House. Marissa, is that kind of where we're headed for the next close election? And by close, Biden won by 7 million votes?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be really hard to say what's at play and where we're headed at for 2024. There's a whole heap of variables that go into that, from fundraising to endorsements to, what is being publicly said. But I think with Michigan, since that's just the topic that we're focused on, if Michigan can elect a red slate for statewide offices and retain their majority, there's no reason to doubt that Michigan, isn't going to be in play and wouldn't go pro-Trump if he becomes the nominee in 2024.
Michael, I guess what I would respond to you with, the system did tenuously, I guess, but it did hold in 2020. I don't think Trump will try everything, obviously, that he can, even as unreasonable as it could possibly be. But there has to be a wholesale kind of like replacement of the election counting class to have there be a real threat. I mean, you disagree. You clearly think there's a real threat now. I don't think we're in enough danger of that actually being a reality, but I could be wrong.
Look, I think in the midterms, there's a good chance that Democrats lose not just a lot of seats in Congress, but lose a lot of state legislature seats. And is that a risk we're willing to take in terms of the election being overturned? Nothing can be the same after that. One of the things about the Trump presidency, which really changed everything, was just the destruction of norms. And so I think every Republican has to be on record and take attendance at this point and really say, if Donald Trump loses Michigan, but they have state representatives and it's a red state, will they support Michigan overturning the will of the voters? I think that is a real honest conversation to be had, because for so long, the conversation was, oh, Democrats are overreacting. Oh, this is just, Democrats trying to stir things up. We have seen things happen over the last 4 years that we never thought would happen. And so I'm not a firebrand, one of those people who's just tossing bombs out there. But it really does scare me that we could have a situation where the will of the voters changed, and that will lead to the type of confrontations that we've only thought about in our worst nightmares.
And it'll all have racial undertones, or in fact overtones, because it'll all be focused on Detroit. And saying that, well, look, without Detroit, Trump would have won Michigan, the way that they said, well, without Philadelphia, Trump actually would have won Pennsylvania. It's like, well, hate to tell you, Philadelphia and Detroit are parts of the United States of America, whether you like it or not.
And or Trump could win. He could just cleanly win, and what some Democrats would say, well, he didn't actually win because it was Russia's fault. There would be people saying that.
But they would just whine and do a podcast and move on. They wouldn't ransack the Capitol.
Right. Well,
what I did.
Well, there's been some ransacking. Hopefully, there will be no further ransacking from either political coalition. Would be my ideal. So anyway, thank you both for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you take care.
Well, more Rising right after this.